The first thing Elias Venn noticed about the child was that she had dismantled his diagnostic drone with a spoon. He stood beneath the silver branches of a bioengineered shade tree in Colony Park 7, holding a plasma coupler in one hand and staring at the neat arrangement of drone parts spread across the grass. The little girl sat in the middle of them, with her knees tucked beneath her, humming happily while the spoon's polished surface reflected her wide violet eyes. She looked almost human, except for the long pointed ears rising through her pale golden hair and the faint blue shimmer moving beneath the skin at her temples whenever she became excited. "That drone costs more than my apartment," Elias said. She looked up. "Your apartment must be very small." "It is, but that is not the point." "Then why did you mention it?" Elias opened his mouth, paused, and decided that frontier engineering had never trained him for this particular type of enemy. Around them, the colony continued its gentle afternoon rhythm. Anti-gravity trams glided silently between crystal towers. Cargo beetles carried market crates along magnetic paths, and 3 tiny moons floated pale against the lavender sky. Colony Lumen was advertised as the most peaceful settlement in the Perseus Accord, which usually meant its systems were old, its council was optimistic, and its engineers were expected to perform miracles with replacement parts manufactured before they were born. Elias had been repairing the playground's gravity field when his drone vanished. He had assumed a software fault. He had not expected a 7-year-old alien mechanic armed with cafeteria cutlery. "Why did you take it apart?" he asked. It was making a sad sound. It was scanning the gravity coils. "Sadly." She pointed to a cracked stabilizer ring hidden beneath the drone's casing. Elias crouched and examined it. The child was right. Another hour of operation and the ring would have shattered, possibly sending the drone through a nearby fountain or, knowing his luck, through the governor's office window. "You found that by listening?" "No. I found it because smoke came out." "That is an important detail." "You didn't ask about smoke." Elias sighed. "What's your name?" "Mira." She held up the spoon. "I'm helping. You are committing mechanical crimes." "Is helping a crime for humans?" "Only when it involves spoons." Mira considered this seriously, then placed the spoon on the grass as though surrendering a weapon. Elias tried to rebuild the drone while she watched from less than 20 centimeters away. Every time he reached for a tool, she handed him the wrong one with great confidence. When he requested a microspanner, she offered a nutrient biscuit. When he asked for the circuit adhesive, she gave him a yellow flower. "This is not adhesive," he said. "It could be if you believed in it. That is not how engineering works." "Maybe human engineering is too negative." Despite himself, Elias laughed. He had not done that often since arriving on Lumen 11 months earlier. Most days he worked alone beneath service decks or inside humming reactor corridors, speaking only to machines that answered in error codes. Mira filled the silence as easily as sunlight filled glass. She asked why humans had such small ears, whether Earth engineers fought robots for tools, and whether he had ever repaired a star. Elias told her stars were generally outside his service contract. By the time the drone powered back on, Mira had appointed herself his assistant, renamed the machine Captain Buzz, and placed the yellow flower on its sensor dome. Captain Buzz rose unsteadily, rotated twice, and projected a warning message across Elias's face. "Unauthorized organic decoration detected." Mira clapped. "It likes it. It is threatening to shut down. That is how machines show affection." A clear voice carried across the park. "Mira." The child froze. Elias turned and saw a tall alien woman approaching along the luminous stone path. She wore a dark blue noble coat threaded with silver circuitry, and her long ears were adorned with delicate communication bands. Her face was strikingly human in shape, calm and elegant, though worry tightened her expression. 2 hovering security spheres followed several steps behind her. Mira immediately crawled behind Elias's equipment case. "Mira," the woman repeated, "it is time to return home." "I am working," Mira called from behind the case. "You are hiding." "I can do both." The woman stopped before Elias and looked at the scattered tools, the decorated drone, and her daughter's shoes protruding from concealment. "I apologize," she said. "She has a talent for escaping supervision. She also has a talent for detecting damaged stabilizer rings." Elias glanced down. "And possibly organized sabotage." Mira leaned out. "I saved the robot." "After taking it apart," Elias added. "That was part of saving it." The woman's stern expression softened for the briefest moment. "Come, Mira." The girl emerged, walked solemnly toward her mother, then suddenly spun around and wrapped both arms around Elias's leg. "No." Elias nearly dropped the plasma coupler. The security spheres moved forward at once, their lenses glowing red. He raised both hands. "For the record, I did not teach her that." Mira held tighter. "I want to stay with the human." Her mother stared at Elias, and beneath her composed noble bearing he saw surprise, suspicion, and something more fragile. Elias looked down at the child, clinging to him as though they had known each other for years rather than one afternoon. Captain Buzz hovered beside them, flower still balanced on its head, and announced in a cheerful synthetic voice, "Unauthorized emotional attachment detected." For once, Elias thought, the machine had diagnosed the situation perfectly. Lady Seralyne Vale did not raise her voice when Mira refused to release Elias's leg, which somehow made the situation feel more dangerous. She merely stood beneath the silver-leafed tree with the stillness of someone accustomed to entire rooms obeying her without delay. The two security spheres hovered at shoulder height, their red lenses fixed on Elias as though calculating how many pieces of him would fit into an evidence container. Elias kept his hands raised. "I would like it officially recorded that I am being held against my will by someone who weighs approximately 20 kilograms. 22, Mira corrected. "I had dessert." Seralyne's long ears tilted slightly, the only visible crack in her composure. "Mira, release the engineer." "He needs me." "I survived 36 years before meeting you," Elias said. "Poorly," Mira replied. "Your drone was broken." Captain Buzz emitted a soft chime from beside them. "Assessment. Child's argument has a 47% probability of accuracy." Elias glared at it. "You are one flower away from being recycled." Seralyne finally stepped closer and crouched until she was level with her daughter. Fine silver lines glowed along the collar of her coat, responding to her pulse. "You left your tutor, crossed 2 transport lanes, and entered a restricted maintenance zone." "There was a sign," Mira admitted. "And what did the sign say?" "Authorized personnel only." "And are you authorized personnel?" Mira considered the question, then pointed at Elias. "He authorized me." Seralyne looked up. Elias shook his head immediately. "She declared herself my assistant. There was no interview process." "I brought him a biscuit," Mira said. "That is practically employment." For one dangerous second, Seralyne's lips threatened to curve into a smile. Then she regained control and extended her hand. Mira sighed with the exhaustion of someone burdened by unreasonable adults, released Elias, and placed her small hand in her mother's. Yet before Seralyne could lead her away, the playground lights flickered. A low vibration rolled through the grass. Children squealed as the gravity field beneath the central play ring surged, lifting several benches, a fountain sculpture, and one extremely surprised snack vendor half a meter into the air. Elias's amusement vanished. He snatched the diagnostic pad from his belt. Crimson symbols raced across its surface. "Everyone clear the ring!" he shouted. The security spheres reacted instantly, projecting a translucent barrier around Mira and Seralyne. Across the park, parents grabbed floating children while maintenance alarms began pulsing from the ground. Elias ran toward the control pillar. The system should have shut down automatically, but the emergency relays were not responding. The gravity coils beneath the park were feeding power back into themselves, building toward a violent inversion. If the field collapsed at full charge, everything currently floating would come down with enough force to crack the plaza. "Captain Buzz, access the secondary grid." The drone darted toward the pillar and connected by a thread of blue light. "Access denied. Reason: municipal software considers me decorated garden equipment." "Remove the flower. Emotional damage may result." "Do it." The flower dropped. Captain Buzz linked again, but the system rejected it. Elias pulled open the pillar's casing and found the manual conduits glowing white with heat. He needed someone small enough to reach the isolation latch buried behind them. Before he could think of another option, Mira slipped beneath the security barrier and ran to him. "I can reach it." Seralyne's voice cut through the alarms. "Mira, stop!" Elias looked from the narrow access shaft to the child. Every instinct told him not to involve her, but the power reading climbed another 7%. "There's a blue lever inside," he said. "Not the red one." "What happens if I pull the red one?" "The park becomes a crater." Mira nodded solemnly. "Blue seems better." She crawled into the compartment. Seralyne reached Elias a moment later, her face pale with fury and fear. "You sent my daughter into an unstable generator. I sent the only person small enough to prevent it from exploding. That explanation is not comforting. It was not designed to be." The ground shook harder. Mira's voice echoed from inside. "There are 2 blue levers." Elias stared at the schematic. Of course there were. Colonial engineers from the previous century had apparently hated clarity. "One has 3 silver lines. Pull that one. The other one is prettier. Engineering does not reward beauty." "That explains your jacket," Mira called back. Even Seralyne made a startled sound that might have been laughter. A second later, the lever snapped down. The vibration stopped. Benches, toys, and the furious snack vendor descended gently to the ground as the gravity field stabilized. Silence spread through the park, followed by cheers. Mira crawled out with grease on her cheek and triumph in her eyes. Seralyne swept her into her arms so quickly that Mira squeaked. For several breaths, the noblewoman said nothing. She simply held her daughter, eyes closed, her long ears trembling faintly. When she looked at Elias again, the suspicion in her gaze had changed. It had not vanished, but now it shared space with reluctant gratitude. "You trusted her," she said quietly. "She earned it." Mira beamed over her mother's shoulder. "Does this mean I'm officially employed?" Elias glanced at the smoking control pillar. "It means your first day nearly destroyed public property." "So I'm doing well?" Seralyne shook her head, but this time the smile escaped. It was small, unexpected, and warm enough to make Elias forget the alarm still echoing across the colony. Then Captain Buzz floated between them, Flower restored to its sensor dome. "New assessment. Family-like behavior detected." All 3 stared at it. Elias pointed toward the maintenance cart. "That drone is absolutely getting recycled." 3 mornings after the playground incident, Elias found Mira sitting on top of his maintenance cart wearing a pair of oversized protective goggles and holding a wrench twice the length of her arm. "No," he said, before she could speak. Mira lowered the goggles. "You do not know what I was going to ask. You were going to ask whether you could come with me. I was going to inform you that I am coming with you. That is somehow worse." Behind her, Captain Buzz hovered with the yellow flower still fixed proudly to its sensor dome. The drone projected a glowing message into the air. "Junior engineering assistant present for duty." Elias looked at the machine. "You made her an identification badge?" "Affirmative. You cannot issue badges." Counterpoint. "I already did." Mira tapped the silver badge pinned to her coat. It displayed her name, a badly drawn wrench, and the rank of Supreme Mechanical Commander. Elias rubbed his forehead. "I am surrounded by criminals." "We prefer innovators," Mira said. Before he could order either of them away, a sleek black transport glided to a stop beside the service bay. Its door unfolded without a sound, and Lady Seralyne stepped out wearing a pale gray traveling coat over fitted diplomatic armor. Morning light caught in her golden hair and along the elegant curve of her long ears. She looked less severe than she had in the park, though her gaze sharpened the moment she saw her daughter on the cart. "Mira." "Mother." "Why are you dressed like a maintenance worker?" "Because engineers do not wear ceremonial silk. Neither do thieves, yet you appear dressed for both professions." Elias turned away to hide a smile. Seralyne approached him and held out a data crystal. "The Eastern Residential District suffered another power fluctuation last night. The council requested an independent inspection." Elias inserted the crystal into his wrist terminal. A holographic map opened above his hand, showing a chain of failures running beneath the colony. The pattern was too precise to be random. "These outages are moving," he said. "Each one is closer to the old subterranean grid." Seralyne's expression changed. That network was sealed before the colony was founded. Then something down there never received the announcement. An hour later, they descended through a maintenance lift beneath the Eastern District. Seralyne had insisted on accompanying them, partly because the affected district belonged to her house, and mostly because Mira had refused to remain behind. The lift groaned as it passed below the modern foundations into older tunnels lined with black alloy. Pale symbols pulsed across the walls, appearing and vanishing like thoughts moving through a sleeping mind. "These markings are not colonial," Seralyne said. "No," Elias replied. "They are at least 900 years old." Mira leaned toward one. "It says welcome." Elias checked his translator. "It says pressure hazard." "That is less friendly." The tunnel opened into a vast chamber containing a dormant machine shaped like a ring of intertwined metal roots. Blue energy flickered within its center, weak but growing stronger. Elias moved closer, scanning the surface. "It is drawing power from the colony." Seralyne studied the symbols. "My people have legends about devices like this. They were called memory gates." "That sounds harmless. They could store the consciousness of entire cities." "I withdraw my previous optimism." Captain Buzz floated toward the ring. The machine answered with a deep harmonic tone. At once, spectral figures appeared around them, translucent alien beings in ancient robes, frozen in fragments of conversation. One walked through Elias's shoulder. Another stood beside Mira and repeated the same silent gesture toward the gate. Mira waved at it. "I think he likes me." "He has been dead for 9 centuries, Elias said. "That does not mean he has bad manners." A warning flashed across his scanner. The gate's power intake doubled. The chamber doors slammed shut, and the holographic figures turned toward them in perfect unison. Seralyne drew a compact plasma blade from beneath her coat. Its white edge ignited with a clean hiss. "Tell me you know how to stop this." Elias knelt beside a control node covered in unfamiliar circuitry. "I know how to pretend confidently while I learn." "Is that a human engineering method?" "It is the foundation of the profession." Mira crouched beside him before Seralyne could object. She pointed toward a sequence of symbols pulsing beneath the casing. "Those are the same shapes from the playground control system." Elias looked closer. She was right. The colony's modern gravity network had been built over fragments of this ancient technology, perhaps without anyone realizing it. Every recent repair had fed more energy into the buried gate. "The failures are not damage," he said. "They are signals. It has been trying to wake up." The spectral figures began moving. Their mouths opened, releasing a layered chorus that shook dust from the ceiling. Elias connected his terminal to the node, but the system rejected every command. Then Mira placed both hands against the surface. The symbols beneath her palms changed from blue to gold. Seralyne grabbed her shoulder. "Step away." "Wait," Elias said. The gate was responding to Mira's biological signature. A strand of light rose from the machine and touched her forehead. Images flooded the chamber. A burning sky, ships falling in silence, and thousands of alien faces entering the ring before darkness consumed them. Mira gasped but did not pull away. "They are afraid," she whispered. Elias rerouted the gate's energy through Captain Buzz while Seralyne translated the ancient command patterns. Their voices overlapped with the machine's rising hum. "Left conduit!" Elias shouted. Seralyne severed it with her blade. "That one?" "I sincerely hope so." Captain Buzz spun wildly in the air. "Power load exceeding design specifications. Flower security compromised." The yellow flower flew off and struck Elias in the face. Mira laughed despite the danger, and the sound seemed to break the gate's hold. Elias entered the final shutdown command. The golden symbols collapsed inward, the spectral figures vanished, and the chamber fell into darkness. For several seconds, no one moved. Then emergency lights flickered on. Seralyne pulled Mira into her arms. but her eyes remained on Elias. "You trusted her again." Elias looked at the child, who was still staring at the silent gate. "She saw what none of us could." Mira lifted her chin proudly. "Supreme Mechanical Commander." Elias retrieved the crushed flower from the floor. "Your first official duty is finding Captain Buzz a less ridiculous decoration." The drone emitted an offended beep. Seralyne laughed then, openly this time, the sound echoing through the ancient chamber. Elias realized he liked it far more than he should. The invitation arrived at Elias's apartment, folded into a triangle of blue light above his breakfast table. He stared at it while chewing a piece of synthetic toast that had the texture of insulation foam and nearly the same nutritional value. The holographic seal of House Vale rotated slowly in the air, elegant and impossible to ignore. "You are formally requested to attend the evening meal at Vile Residence," the message announced in Seralyne's calm voice. "This is not a diplomatic summons." A pause followed. "Mira insisted I clarify that." Elias looked across the room at Captain Buzz, who was charging beside the window with a new metal leaf attached to its sensor dome. "Did you know about this?" "Affirmative." "And you said nothing?" "Social ambushes produce useful data." Elias pointed at the drone with his spoon. "One day, I am going to replace your personality core with a doorbell." Vile Residence stood on the colony's upper terrace beneath a transparent dome that displayed the night sky without atmospheric distortion. The building had been grown rather than constructed, its pale walls curving like the interior of a shell, while luminous vines carried power between rooms. Elias arrived in his cleanest jacket, which was still a maintenance jacket, and immediately regretted every life decision that had led him there. A servant drone scanned him at the entrance. "Foreign biological residue detected." Elias glanced down at the smear on his sleeve. "Coolant. Classification? Probably harmless." The drone hesitated. "Confidence level. Emotionally or scientifically?" Mira appeared before it could answer and launched herself at him. "You came." "I was summoned by a floating triangle." "Mother said it was an invitation." It used the word requested in a very threatening voice. Seralyne entered from the adjoining hall, wearing a simple silver gown threaded with moving constellations. Without her diplomatic armor, she seemed warmer, though no less striking. Her long ears were unadorned except for a single blue gem near one tip. I was not aware my voice was threatening. It once made 2 security spheres prepare to disassemble me. That was not my voice. That was Mira refusing to release your leg. A subtle distinction. Dinner began with formal restraint and collapsed within 6 minutes. Mira refused to sit in her assigned chair and dragged her cushion between Elias and Seralyne. She asked him whether humans chose mates through combat, whether engineers married their tools, and whether he had any children hidden in cargo containers. Elias nearly inhaled his drink. Seralyne closed her eyes. "Mira, I am learning about human culture. You are interrogating our guest. That is also culture." Elias set down his glass. "For the record, no children in cargo containers." Mira looked disappointed. The meal itself shifted colors according to taste, which Elias found impressive until one dish turned bright orange after he tried it. "That means it senses fear," Mira explained. "It is cheese. Human courage is mysterious." After dinner, Seralyne led him onto a balcony overlooking Lumen. Below them, magnetic roads glowed between towers, and freight ships rose silently toward orbit. Mira had fallen asleep on a nearby couch with Captain Buzz hovering guard above her. For a while, neither adult spoke. The silence between them felt different from the lonely silence Elias knew. It was not empty. It was waiting. "She has not laughed this much since her father died," Seralyne said at last. Elias turned toward her. The humor left his expression gently, without force. "I did not know. Few do. He was lost during a survey mission beyond the Helix boundary. His ship entered a spatial fracture and never returned. The stars reflected in her eyes. Mira was 4. She remembers his voice, but not his face. Elias rested his hands on the balcony rail. That is why she follows machines. She thinks broken things can always be repaired. And you? Seralyne asked. Why did you come to Lumen? He almost gave the usual answer. Quieter work, better air, fewer committees. Instead, perhaps because the city below seemed distant and Mira slept safely behind them, he told the truth. I worked on orbital transit systems above Earth. One of my designs failed during a test. No one died, but 12 workers were injured. His jaw tightened. The investigation cleared me. A manufacturing defect. Everyone said it was not my fault. You did not believe them. Machines do not care about blame. They only care whether you checked enough times. Seralyne studied him with a softness that made looking away difficult. So you exiled yourself. I prefer the term career relocation. That is a very human way to rename pain. Before Elias could answer, the balcony lights flickered. Both of them stiffened. A faint golden pulse moved beneath the floor, the same color that had awakened under Mira's hands in the ancient chamber. Captain Buzz spun toward the sleeping child. Anomalous energy signature detected. Seralyne was beside Mira in an instant. The girl stirred, her long ears twitching, then opened her eyes. For one breath, they shone gold. They found the door, she whispered. Elias felt the night air turn cold. Who found it? Mira looked past him, toward the stars above the dome. Far beyond the colony, a point of darkness appeared where no darkness should have been, swallowing constellations as it widened. Then the colony's orbital alarms began to howl. Mira reached for Elias with one hand, and her mother with the other. The people inside the gate, she said. They are coming home. Captain Buzz drifted closer and announced with unusually poor timing. Assessment. Dinner has become complicated. Elias stared at the growing shadow in the sky. That may be the first intelligent thing you have said all week. The darkness above Lumen was not an approaching ship. Elias realized that the moment the colony observatory projected its readings across Vielle residence, ships displaced light, bent sensors, and usually announced themselves with identification codes or weapons fire. This thing erased distance. A circular wound had opened between the stars, its edge lined with golden lightning, while every power grid on the colony surged toward it, as though answering a command older than civilization. The buried gate is active again, Elias said. Not active, Seralyne replied, fastening the silver plates of her diplomatic armor over her gown. Connected. Mira sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket, unusually quiet. The gold had faded from her eyes, but faint symbols moved beneath the skin of her palms. Captain Buzz scanned them repeatedly and produced increasingly worried beeps. Biological status. Impossibly strange. Mira frowned. That is rude. Correction. Medically interesting. Seralyne knelt before her daughter. You are staying here. No. Mira. The gate listens to me. That is exactly why you are staying. Mira crossed her arms. That makes no sense. Elias crouched beside them. Unfortunately, it makes excellent parental sense. Mira looked betrayed. You are supposed to be my assistant. I thought you were mine. Rank has changed. A violent tremor passed through the residence. The luminous vines in the walls flared gold, and every window briefly showed a different sky, red suns, shattered moons, cities floating above oceans of cloud. Then the images vanished. Elias checked his terminal. The memory gate is bleeding stored realities into the colony network. If it reaches the main reactor, every system on Lumen could become part of the archive. Meaning? Seralyne asked. Doors may forget where they lead. Gravity may remember another planet. The air processors might decide oxygen is historically inaccurate. Captain Buzz rotated toward the corridor. Recommendation: panic efficiently. They reached the subterranean chamber aboard Seralyne's armored transport, descending through streets already distorted by the gate's influence. Holographic strangers walked through buildings. Ancient warships flickered above rooftops. For 30 seconds, the colony's artificial gravity reversed and sent every unsecured object drifting upward. Elias grabbed a handrail with one hand and Mira's coat with the other while Seralyne anchored herself using magnetic boots. Captain Buzz struck the ceiling and complained that flight was more dignified when voluntary. At the chamber entrance, HFY guards struggled against spectral figures pouring through the sealed doors. The apparitions were no longer silent. Thousands of voices spoke through them in a single layered tone. Return the key. Mira gripped Elias's hand. They mean me. Seralyne moved in front of her, plasma blade igniting. They will not have you. The chamber doors opened by themselves. Inside, the memory gate towered above them, its metal roots glowing like a captive star. At its center floated the image of an alien city under attack. Ships burned above its towers while civilians entered the gate in endless lines. Elias finally understood. They were not storing memories, he said. They were storing people. Seralyne stared at him. Consciousness copies. More than copies. Entire neural patterns suspended in quantum space. The gate was an evacuation vessel. A figure stepped from the light. It appeared male, tall and translucent, wearing the armor of an extinct dynasty. Unlike the others, he looked directly at Mira. Descendant of the Keepers, he said. Open the passage. Seralyne's blade rose. She is a child. She is the final key. The chamber shook as the void above Lumen widened. Elias connected his terminal to the gate's control node. Data flooded across the screen faster than language. If they fully cross, the energy demand will collapse the colony. Then close it, Seralyne said. If I close it now, they die. The ancient figure's expression did not change. We have waited 912 years. You chose a terrible week, Elias muttered. Our reactor inspection is overdue. Mira pulled free of Seralyne and approached the gate. Golden symbols ignited beneath her feet. Can we send them somewhere else? Elias looked at the system map. Beyond the colony lay an unfinished orbital habitat, empty since its construction company went bankrupt. It had power, life support, and enough processing capacity to hold a city of minds, but no stable connection to the gate. Possibly, he said. That word means he has a bad idea, Seralyne told Mira. Most of my ideas begin badly. Elias rerouted the gate through Lumen's communications array, while Seralyne commanded every orbital transmitter to target the abandoned habitat. Captain Buzz entered the central conduit to stabilize the signal, protesting that decorative drones were not designed for heroic sacrifice. You are not sacrificing yourself, Mira called. Good, the drone replied. I had prepared a very long final speech. The ancient figures surged toward the gate. Energy tore across the chamber. Elias's terminal burned his palms, and Seralyne braced him as the floor split beneath their feet. Mira placed both hands against the core. You cannot live here, she told the waiting minds. But we found you a new home. The golden vortex twisted upward. Across the sky, the darkness folded into a bright thread that shot toward orbit. One by one, the spectral figures dissolved into streams of light. The ancient warrior remained until the end. He bowed to Mira, then vanished. Silence fell. The gate dimmed. Elias sagged against Seralyne, and for a moment neither moved away. Mira looked between them and smiled despite her exhaustion. You are holding each other. Seralyne released Elias at once. He was falling. I fall professionally, Elias said. Captain Buzz emerged, smoking from the conduit. Assessment. Romantic denial detected. Elias picked up a loose metal panel. I am finally recycling you. Mira laughed. Seralyne tried not to, and somewhere above them an ancient city awakened inside a new world. For the first week after the memory gate crisis, Elias expected life on Lumen to return to normal. Instead, normal appeared to have resigned without notice. The abandoned orbital habitat was now home to several million ancient consciousnesses. The Colony Council had formed 14 committees to decide whether digital citizens required taxes, and Captain Buzz had been officially recognized as a temporary interspecies liaison after accidentally insulting 3 diplomats in languages it did not know it spoke. Elias spent his days repairing systems damaged by the gate and his evenings at Vielle residence, where Mira had quietly assigned him a permanent seat at the dining table. No one had approved this arrangement, but no one had managed to stop it either. Seralyne no longer sent formal holographic invitations. She simply called and said, "Mira believes you are starving." The first time, Elias had replied that he owned food. Seralyne had asked whether synthetic toast legally qualified. He had arrived 20 minutes later. On the 9th evening, Mira fell asleep halfway through dinner with her cheek resting beside a bowl of luminous fruit. Seralyne carried her to bed while Elias collected the plates, despite the house drones repeatedly informing him that noble guests were not permitted to perform domestic labor. "I am an engineer," he told one. "Ignoring instructions from machines is part of my culture." When Seralyne returned, she found him standing on the balcony, watching the orbital habitat drift across the stars like a second moon. Its once dark windows now glowed with patterns created by the awakened city within. "They sent another message today," she said, joining him. "The ancient council wishes to name Mira keeper of the passage." Elias leaned on the rail. "She will demand a larger badge." "She already has." Seralyne smiled, but worry remained beneath it. "They also requested that she visit the habitat." "You said no." "Immediately." "Good." Then I spent 6 hours wondering whether I had protected her or denied her a part of herself. Elias looked at her. Without ceremonial armor or court attendants, she seemed less like a noblewoman and more like a tired mother trying to carry a future too large for one person. "You made the decision that let you sleep tonight," he said. "That is sometimes all a parent can do. You speak as though you have experience. I have experience repairing machines built by people who made terrible decisions and then left no instructions. It feels similar." Her laugh was quiet, but it lingered between them. "Mira trusts you completely. That is because she has poor judgment. She trusts very few adults." Seralyne's long ears lowered slightly, betraying an uncertainty her voice concealed. "I trust very few as well." Elias felt the meaning before she finished speaking. For months he had treated his growing attachment to them like a damaged circuit, something to observe carefully without touching. Yet there, beneath the quiet stars, avoidance felt more dishonest than fear. "Seralyne," he began. The resident's alarm chimed. They both closed their eyes. "Of course," Elias muttered. "The universe has excellent timing." Captain Buzz shot through the balcony doors. "Urgent notice. Mira is missing." They reached her room in seconds. The bed was empty, the window sealed, and a circle of golden symbols burned across the floor. At its center hovered Mira's Supreme Mechanical Commander badge. Seralyne's face went white. "The habitat took her." Elias scanned the symbols. "No. She activated the transfer herself." Captain Buzz projected a recorded message. Mira appeared in miniature, wearing her goggles and trying to look serious. "Do not worry. I am going to tell the old people to stop asking Mother difficult questions. Also, I packed biscuits." The recording ended. Seralyne stared at Elias. She crossed vacuum through an ancient quantum gate with snacks. In her defense, hunger would have complicated the mission. Seralyne did not laugh. Elias took her hands before he could reconsider. We will bring her back. The transfer chamber beneath the house had formed where Mira's energy signature first awakened. Its golden field was unstable, flickering between lumen and the orbital habitat. Elias configured his wrist terminal while Captain Buzz connected to the control lattice. The passage can hold 2 biological patterns, the drone said. A third may become abstract art. You stay here, Elias told it. Objection. Denied. Seralyne stepped into the light beside him. Their shoulders touched. You do not have to come. Elias looked at her. I crossed half the galaxy to hide from responsibility. Your daughter found me with a spoon. I think the hiding part is over. The gate seized them. Light folded into sound. Gravity vanished. For one impossible instant, Elias felt every memory he had ever tried to bury passing through him like stars. Then he and Seralyne struck a metal floor beneath an artificial sky. Around them stretched the restored city of the ancients, its towers constructed from hard light and quantum matter. Thousands of translucent citizens stood silently along the avenue. At the far end, Mira sat on a floating throne much too large for her, eating a biscuit while arguing with the ancient warrior who had once demanded her power. I said no sacrifices, she declared. That is a very outdated tradition. Elias exhaled. Seralyne's grip tightened around his hand before she ran forward and swept Mira into her arms. The ancient warrior looked at Elias. The child is formidable. You should see her with a spoon. Mira clung to her mother, then reached for Elias as well, pulling him into the embrace with surprising strength. I knew you would both come. You are grounded until your species evolves, Seralyne whispered. Mira looked at Elias over her shoulder. Is that a long time? Based on human experience, extremely. The ancient citizens began to bow, not to Mira alone, but to the 3 of them. Elias felt Seralyne's hand find his again. This time, neither of them let go. 3 months after Mira's unauthorized journey to the orbital habitat, the Festival of 3 Moons transformed Lumen into a city of floating lanterns, silver music, and food that changed flavor according to the eater's mood. The Colony Council had officially recognized the ancient citizens as a sovereign digital civilization. House Vielle had opened formal relations with them, and the memory gate beneath the colony had been rebuilt into a stable passage under Elias's supervision. The project report listed him as Chief Systems Architect. Mira had crossed out the title and replaced it with Assistant to the Supreme Mechanical Commander. Elias had stopped correcting her. He had also stopped pretending that Vielle residence was merely a place he visited. Half his tools now occupied Seralyne's workshop. His old maintenance jacket hung beside her diplomatic armor, and Captain Buzz had moved into the house without permission, claiming that interspecies diplomacy required better charging facilities. You have been staring at that coupling for 9 minutes, Seralyne said from the garden path. Elias looked down at the festival generator spread open before him. I am thinking. You tightened the same bolt 4 times. I am thinking carefully. She stood beneath the lantern light wearing a dark blue gown traced with tiny moving stars. Her golden hair fell over her shoulders, revealing the elegant length of her ears and the silver communication bands she had once worn like armor. Now they carried only music. Elias had faced reactor failures, quantum storms, and an army of preserved minds, yet the sight of her still disrupted his ability to form useful sentences. Mira appeared between them in ceremonial robes that were already stained with festival syrup. He is nervous, she announced. I am repairing a generator. You repair things faster when you are not nervous. Seralyne folded her arms. What have you done? Nothing, Elias said. Captain Buzz drifted from behind the generator and projected a large golden message into the air. Classified romantic procedure in progress. Elias stared at the drone. I am going to throw you into the sun. Threat recorded as affection. Before Seralyne could question him further, music sounded from the central plaza. Citizens from dozens of worlds gathered beneath 3 artificial moons projected above the colony dome. Alongside them stood luminous representatives of the ancient city, their hard light forms now stable enough to walk openly among the living. The warrior who had once demanded Mira's sacrifice had chosen the name Arvin and become the habitat's first ambassador. He approached wearing modern diplomatic robes over his ancient armor. "Keeper Mira," he said with a solemn bow. "The council awaits your ceremonial address." Mira sighed. "Do I have to use the long speech?" "Tradition requires it." Tradition also required sacrifices. Arvin paused. "The short speech will be acceptable." Seralyne laughed and took her daughter's hand. Elias followed them into the plaza, no longer lingering behind as though he were only a hired engineer. The realization came quietly. Once, he had chosen isolation because machines seemed safer than people. Machines could fail, but their failures had explanations. Love offered no diagnostic screen, no guaranteed repair, and no protection against loss. Yet Mira had dismantled his solitude as easily as she had dismantled Captain Buzz, and Seralyne had taught him that responsibility was not a punishment. Sometimes it was simply the name given to staying. Mira stepped onto the platform and faced the crowd. 900 years ago, people entered a gate because they were afraid their world would end, she said. They survived because someone believed the future might still be kind. We found them because Elias listened to broken machines. Mother refused to abandon anyone, and I pulled the correct blue lever. Elias leaned toward Seralyne. She has simplified history. She is 7. She also omitted the crater risk. A wise political decision. Mira continued. Tonight, the people of Lumen and the people of the habitat are not strangers. We are neighbors. Also, old laws about child sacrifice are officially stupid. The plaza erupted in laughter and applause. Arvin bowed his head as if accepting a profound constitutional amendment. When the ceremony ended, Mira dragged Elias and Seralyne toward the illuminated park where they had first met. The playground gravity field now lifted children gently among floating rings of light. Captain Buzz followed, decorated with an entire crown of yellow flowers. "It is time to go home," Seralyne said when the final moon reached the top of the dome. Mira immediately wrapped both arms around Elias's leg. "No." Seralyne raised an eyebrow. "We are all going to the same house." "Then he should promise." Elias looked down. "Promise what?" "That you are not leaving later." The laughter around them faded into the warm hum of the festival. Seralyne's expression softened, but she said nothing. Elias reached into his pocket and removed a small silver device shaped like a folded star. He had built it from a fragment of the original memory gate and a piece of his first diagnostic drone. When activated, it projected 3 interlocking lights. "This is a human promise," he said, though his voice was less steady than he wanted. "Or at least my version of one." He looked at Seralyne. "I came to Lumen because I thought being alone meant no one could be hurt by my mistakes. You and Mira proved that being alone was the mistake." Seralyne's eyes shone beneath the floating lanterns. "Elias, I do not know noble customs. I do not own ceremonial armor, and my apartment is apparently too small. But I would like to stay. Not as your engineer. Not as Mira's unofficial assistant." Mira cleared her throat. "Official assistant. As family," he finished. Seralyne stepped closer and placed her hand over his. "Then stay." Mira shouted loudly enough to startle several birds from the silver trees. She threw her arms around them both, trapping Elias between 2 long-eared veils, while Captain Buzz circled overhead. "Family unit confirmed," the drone announced. Probability of emotional complications, 100%. Elias looked at Seralyne across Mira's head. Can I recycle it now? No, Seralyne said, laughing as she kissed him. Above them, the 3 moons burned brightly. The ancient habitat shone among the stars, and Elias understood at last that not everything broken needed to be restored to what it had been. Some things could be rebuilt into something better.